see we've got a nice group already joining us. So let's get started. Thanks for joining us for another CRETech webinar. I'm Bethany Beavis, Director of Events. So we have some really interesting and timely topics to talk about today, and we solicited our friends over at JLL Technologies to help us put together this panel on the next generation of the office experiences, uniting HR, IT, and innovation teams in a new C-suite role. And boy, did they really deliver with a bunch of heavy hitters from their organization. So you all are in for a real treat today. I know we're all looking for solutions when it comes to reentry and really beyond that, help in reimagining the workplace completely. We're all trying to understand the shifts we need to take both in our business and our culture to kind of embrace this new era. And those are the questions that they're going to really focus on today in this webinar. I really hope for two things. One, you learn a lot, ask a lot of questions. Please use the Q&A. We want this to be interactive. And two, I hope you really are inspired to kind of convene a roundtable within your own organization of these roles and have these conversations. From there, if you have more questions, please head over to jllt.com and keep the conversations going with our friends at JLL Technologies. They've got a lot of experts. So beyond that, that's enough for me. Let's get it started. I'm so delighted to introduce our moderator, Digital CIO of JLL Technologies, Eddie Wagner. Thanks, Eddie.
Thank you, Bethany, and welcome everybody to our session today. Today we're going to talk about next generation office experiences, as Bethany said, and it's something that I passionately believe we all need to do, and that's unite and more tightly integrate our HR, technology, and real estate expertise into a new innovative team that helps our C-suite as we create, use, and manage our next generation offices. Now you might be thinking, why are we talking next generation offices right now? And why are we talking about HR, IT, and corporate real estate taking on another project with everything we have going on? In the shadow of COVID-19, technology projects that previously would have taken weeks and months were completed in days that set new expectations for how we deliver. The resulting force changes that we've seen in our lives with shelter in place, remote work, taking care of our families, and other societal challenges that we are all experiencing are creating unprecedented pressures on what matters most, our people. The corporate functions that would address each of these factors in our workplace, human resources, technology, real estate, and more, have historically been siloed. Even if they're not completely siloed in your company, there's an opportunity, and I believe an imperative, to truly reimagine the workplace as a conduit for communication, collaboration, and creativity wherever work is happening. That calls for our need to unify HR, IT, and real estate skills like we never have before. Think of it as coming together as a chief workplace officer, reimagining the role of the workplace, leveraging technology, creating more flexibility, and providing a better experience for our people. As Bethany mentioned, I'm Edward Wagner. I'm the CIO of Digital for JLL Technologies, and I'm delighted to have the panel today that will help us understand why we need to align to create our next generation real estate strategy. First, I'd like to introduce Marcellus Parker. Marcellus oversees real estate and workplace for JLL's own global real estate portfolio. Thanks for joining, Marcellus. Next is George Thomas. George is JLL's Global Chief Information Officer, and they say technology never sleeps. I'm not sure George actually sleeps either, as he's joining us from the middle of his night in Singapore. George, thanks for staying up late or getting up early, whichever the case may be, to share your expertise. And finally, everything we do at JLL is with a focus on helping our clients. And over the last 20 years, I've had the privilege to work with, maybe I should say for, Eva Marie Smith, as she has overseen and managed some of our largest client portfolios. Eva Marie, thank you for joining us to share client workplace perspective and expertise.
Thanks, Eddie.
With that, let's jump right into it. Marcellus, I'm going to start with you. And let me just say something up front. You've probably got the hardest job in the world. You oversee the corporate real estate for over 90,000 people who are hired by a who's who of leading entities, and they are considered experts on corporate real estate. So think about that for a minute. So considering that so many of our people are globally recognized experts in the real estate space, what was it like for you to actually pivot all of these experts to a work from home strategy virtually overnight?
Yeah, thank you, Eddie. I appreciate it. For us, it was challenging. I think we experienced a lot of the challenges that most companies did. But I have to say that it was doable. And there are a couple kind of guiding principles when we first made the decision that, hey, it's very likely that we are going to have our people work from home for quite some time. The company was very, very clear on the first and foremost, most important thing was the safety of our people, right? So when you lead with that sort of directive and that charge and commitment even, it's easy to gain alignment. So that was the first thing, right? No matter what, at all costs, the safety of our people was paramount. And then I have to say, thanks to a lot of the infrastructure that's already in place for JLL, the transition was easier for us because we had the infrastructure in place from a technology standpoint and also from a flexible portfolio standpoint. I think, unfortunately, a lot of companies were caught off guard by that and had to invest heavily and sort of, very, very quickly pivot and become technology companies overnight. And we were very fortunate that we had made some key investments and had put in place infrastructure to allow our people to be very mobile. And so I think that was a key component of really having it be an easy transition for our people, which was one of the most important things. So not easy, but it was certainly made doable, and we got to do it very quickly because of the infrastructure that we had in place.
Thanks, Marcellus, for that. And I'm going to come back to a couple of points that you've made throughout our conversation. But as we all know, getting people home and having the technology work that enables them to work from home are two different things. And as you pointed out, there's a lot of stories in the media about technology teams doing a year's worth of work in a matter of weeks, or people pivoting their people to home and the technology not working. So George, let's get your perspective. It must be nice to hear that all of those investments have paid off. But what was your reaction when you heard that we were pivoting worldwide work from home, and what was the impact on your team?
Yeah, no, thanks, Eddie. And thanks, CRE Tech, for arranging this event. A very good day to all our participants today, and also our fellow panelists. To answer your question, Eddie, it was really an all hands on deck situation. As you know, as a company, we operate in over 80 countries, and we have clients in more than 80 countries. And while our peak for COVID hit us globally around March, we had to pivot a couple of months earlier than that in certain parts of the world, specifically Asia Pacific, where we have a large enough business and a large number of clients as well. Now, we certainly didn't expect that we would accelerate to such a large extent almost overnight. So when we got to March, we had almost 90% of our corporate staff working from home due to the ongoing shelter in place restrictions around the world. Back to what Marcellus was saying, we are fortunate in that we started investing in technology quite early. And I'd say that I'd attribute that to not only JLL's strategy, but also the trends that we were seeing. Eddie, I'm sure you will recall the Future of Work report that we put out there in 2017. And the concept that we built on at the time was that today's multi-generation workforce prefers an alternative work style and may demand new work environments behind the traditional office, or beyond the traditional office, if you will, right? And at JLL, what that meant for us was that we then increased our strategic investments in the IT infrastructure area, whether that be movement of on-premise applications to the cloud, or improving our security posture, which is known to happen when we move more applications to the cloud, or embracing things like chat collaboration and productivity software. All of those types of things really enabled us and were instrumental to keep our firm running and our clients supported through this difficult time. There's two other aspects to our success, I think, from a technology standpoint, one of which is really our enterprise operating model for technology at the firm. We've been driving towards this for a few years, and this is not unique to technology at JLL. Our CEO, Christian Ulbrich, has been driving the strategy across the corporate functions and our various lines of business where it makes sense. And we could start to see the benefits of that as we manage through the first few months of COVID. As an example, what that really meant for us in technology was that we have about 1,000 plus IT colleagues around the world. and rallying them across quick decision making was enabled because of this enterprise operating model. And the subsequent pivots we needed to make in month 2 and month 3 when some of the platforms weren't performing as well as we needed to, or VPN infrastructure needed to be upgraded, et cetera. All those decisions we were able to quickly make. And then last but never the least, it's really back to our people. And not only the ones in technology, but the ones that actually work across the world supporting our clients, and the resilience that they show to adapt to this new way of working, right? And all of that put together, in summary, it has gotten us thus far this year, and there's a lot of learnings along the way.
Excellent. Thanks, George. I know my first day working from home was as productive as my last day in the office, so I can personally attest to the work that your team did so we could support our clients, which brings me to Eva Marie. Now, Eva Marie, I know I said Marcellus had the hardest job, but as I think through my next question and talking to you, I think I'm going to change that and say you've got the hardest job. You and your team were being sent home by Marcellus using technology platforms managed by George, while at the same time you were advising, supporting, and helping clients do the exact same thing. So give us your perspective. It's almost like a ballet move. You're having to pivot while you're pivoting for clients. What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Eddie, it's definitely been an interesting time for everybody because we didn't have in our business disaster recovery plans for any company something ready to go for a pandemic. The items that have already been discussed were certainly put into play very quickly. There was the all hands on deck, as you heard already. And with that, I would tell you, our clients were looking to us to get help and get help very, very fast. The beautiful part of being a global company is we were able to leverage a lot from Asia Pac. Unfortunately, they were going through it with at least a 3-month advance than what we were in the Americas. So having that kind of connectivity and being able to connect with them and share back lessons learned was definitely something that was very helpful. I think, part of what Marcellus was talking about really rings true with all of our clients is that this isn't a one and done situation. It really has become a journey. And we are having to go through a multi-phased approach. The first part of it was really that business disaster recovery. The second part of it is looking at remote work and return to work. And what does that look like? So it's taking on a whole new life for every industry that we work with today from a client perspective. And knowing that the new normal is very different than what we had before. So having to put a strategy together that offers up convenience as well as connectivity. And my use of connectivity is culture connectivity. Every one of our corporates that we work with from a client perspective has been telling us we feel like we're losing a little bit of our culture right now because we don't have people coming into the office. So it's a multi-pronged approach.
Thanks, Eva Marie. And as you were talking, it's reminding us constantly how important it is to maintain our focus on clients, even during these unprecedented times, because that's when they need us the most. You mentioned the, help me fast. I think it's also important, you referenced sharing, and that's a lot of what I would encourage people that are participating with us today to do is reach out, share, collaborate as we go through this. So I want to ask you guys some questions around what we've learned and what we think will be the biggest impact to the workplace given our experiences thus far. And as I pivot toward that, I'd also like to remind the audience, you can ask us questions at any point in time and we will get to them and work them in, but we would like your collaboration as we go through this, your sharing and questions back to us. So first I'm going to ask each of you, based on your experience, what prediction about permanent changes do you think organizations need to consider for their workplace as they continue this shift to the next normal? And Eva Marie, I think you said this will be a bit of an iterative process. So what should people think about as we go through that and we navigate office reentry? And Marcellus, I'm going to come back to you and start with you.
Yeah, sure. I think it's a really great question, especially now. I think first and foremost, people, companies, employers are going to have to stop and seriously give thought to what they want their real estate to be about, right? I think we have had the luxury, many companies have had the luxury of saying, well, our real estate is where our people go to work. But we know now that real estate has to serve a higher purpose for our people and for our companies. And so you really have to define that. And that is sitting around the table and, you know, from your leadership to shareholders to your people you're trying to serve, what do you want your real estate to do for your company, for your people? And then as you formulate that, and you then have to focus on what I think is the key to not only sort of responding to this particular pandemic, but really a component of strategic real estate management moving forward. It's flexibility. You have to, from a very fundamental point, build in flexibility for your real estate. And I'm talking from day one, you know, when you engage with a broker and they are out working on your behalf to, you know, for a real estate requirement you have, how are you from a document, from a lease standpoint, building in flexibility so that your company can have the opportunity to pivot as you need to for whatever external factors might hit you, and so that you can continue to do your business and serve your clients. And that is, you know, the right to give space back, the right to grow when you are back in that mode, the right to sublease. I mean, all of that flexibility needs to be built in. And then, of course, looking forward into your business needs, do you have the technology built so that your people truly can work from anywhere? It's not simply work from home. It is, you know, your people need to be equipped. You need to have infrastructures in place so that they can be as productive or more, no matter where they are in the world, right? It's not as simple as saying, you know, I'm going to work out of my wife's office for today and I just need an internet location. I could be anywhere. I may have to be anywhere for my job and to serve the company and our clients. And so making sure you have the infrastructure in place. And then lastly, I think, you know, one of the more permanent changes that we will see related to how people run their real estate is tying it to the experience inside your real estate. You know, oftentimes we talk about a front office and a back office, and, you know, some clients will say, some companies will say, well, I don't need the bells and whistles. This is a back office function, right? Just give me cheap rent and a box to put people in, and you know, we can do our job. Moving forward, your real estate, I think, will have to serve a greater purpose, and you will have to take into account what is the experience of your people when they come into their real estate, and how does your real estate, how does that box, how does that layout, that design, that furniture, that equipment, that technology help your people innovate, connect, and serve your clients, right? And I think that will be a more permanent part of sort of moving forward into whatever our new norm will end up being post-COVID, and certainly as we try and get on the other side of a recovery.
Thanks, Marcellus. And if you are working from your wife's office, I'm going to say you've got much nicer digs than what I've got behind me. So very nice. Kidding aside, I heard flexibility, greater purpose, experience. I think those are some good key words and takeaways. George, let me come to you for the technology perspective.
Yeah, no, thanks, Eddie. And thanks, Marcellus. Offices will remain a focal point of collaboration. I feel like borrowing a quote from our corporate solutions CEO, Neil Murray here. He'd mentioned, you know, after the various conversations he'd had with CEOs of the firms that we support, and he said it's one thing to run a company remotely, but it's an entirely different thing to grow a company remotely. And I thought that was a great statement. If you think about it, one simple measure of this could be onboarding. Consider how one onboards new employees. And back to Eva Marie's point, we can certainly settle the paperwork digitally. We can complete the workflow digitally, but it would be immensely difficult to build that sense of common culture and common purpose for what that firm stands for if the new joiners never see their coworkers physically, right? So what might change is the proportion of individuals who choose to work from home or someplace else. It could be work, it could be home, it could be someplace else. And the types of technology that would now enable a collaborative physical space may also differ in the future. Across all of this, the personal note I give myself on the technology side is, if flexibility is going to be more important going forward than it ever was, we would need to continue to strengthen our cloud and security architecture infrastructure to allow that flexibility. to take place, because if that's going to be a requirement, continued investments in the areas of cloud and security is going to be also going alongside with it.
Make fun of a CIO not knowing to unmute himself before he talks. I was going to say, George, thanks for that. I heard you use the word flexibility, collaborate, also enabling technologies. So seeing some consistent themes here. Eva Marie, going to come over to you, and you're not in a significant other's office. You're actually in an office, a corporate office. So share your thoughts on what people need to consider, especially the fact that you actually are back in the office.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, it's been interesting because the client that I'm working with, they came back relatively fast, and they're a global company, but they're having to have a return to work policy that's quite different, depending on what local jurisdiction is dictating. I think from an approach standpoint, I would tell you there's a couple of things that I've heard across multiple clients. One is that meeting fatigue has actually become a rampant problem. And a lot of that is because you're not interacting and seeing each other personally every day in the office. It appears that back-to-back video conferencing has overwhelmed and created a little bit of an epidemic. The other part that I would tell you is when Marcellus was talking about being nimble and agile and flexible, with that, I think every company is having to be open to challenging and understanding that if my entire workforce is having to work from home, in certain areas, especially as children are all going through school and having to do it online, we're seeing a lot of problems with technology because in one household, how many people can be live streaming at the same time? So we've actually seen in clients' work environment that they're trying to give helpful hints back to managers of how to conduct productive meetings and how to avoid what they're looking as surge time, where kids are having to do all of their Zoom meetings with their teachers and whatnot. So it's been interesting to be a friend of change as it relates to being productive in space. And when we use space, it's no longer about bricks being productive with the ability to connect over the internet. I think the last thing I would tell you is into densifying space prior to everything. But going to be a lot of seat sharing. So you may have heard well, we're 1 to 4 or 4 to 1 and four seat. Now densifying, and we're trying to figure out how do we create a socially distant work environment and creating more need for putting up the productive tools that we need. So being a visionary in real estate is really a talked about thing in the past, and now it's become mandatory.
Thanks for those comments, Eva Marie. It was also interesting as you were talking, we were seeing the need for some better connectivity there as it was cutting in and out. And I was also reminded that I was on a big call the other day, and the CEO of one of the major telecom providers in the world actually said, and I'm looking back, one of their strategic initiatives will be to focus on the fiber networks to promote flexible and remote work for all. And so a bit of a pivot, as you pointed out. We all need the connectivity for work as well as for what's going on in our personal lives. I also heard the word from a non-technology person, the word agile. And George, you know, we've done that for quite a while with technology projects, wondering if we'll start seeing or being able to promote some agile methodologies as we think about how we recreate the workplace to be able to get some things to go faster. So with that, you know, and with you know, we heard the word flexibility from everybody. What are your thoughts from a corporate perspective on what technologies we need to support this modern workplace going forward?
Yeah, no, thanks, Eddie. More than technologies, I think we want to think about this in a couple of different ways, right? The first, I guess, category that's emerging right now is the continual need to support our occupiers, our employees to be able to work anywhere. And in that context, we're seeing a couple of different personas that are emerging, right? And examples of them are the corporate office worker, the client office worker, the remote worker, and then the emergence of the hybrid worker that might actually be cutting across all of these different personas. And so some emphasis on the software and the hardware that is going to be required to enable a set of occupiers, work anywhere. That's going to be a big focus for us. Another one I think about is really about intelligent automation. And what I really mean by that is most large corporations have systems that help manage their human capital, have systems that manage their accounting. And these are typically what we call the big ERP systems. However, with this experience that we've had, it's become even more important that the workflow automation strategies, perhaps using smart tech like artificial intelligence and machine learning, needs to come into focus. This area has applications not only in sort of HR and finance, but also in infrastructure management. If you think about multi-cloud management and what the developers need these days, there's quite a bit of automation that's going to have to be required in that space if we're going to continue to enable people from operating anywhere. So that's another big area of focus and an area of investment that's going to be required. The third is having the infrastructure be very adaptable, but at the same time very secure. So most large corporations have heavy on-premise data centers, and over the last few years we've heard a lot of good stories about companies moving away from that and moving to the cloud. That's going to get accelerated because, if anything, what we've learned from the pandemic is that if we're not on cloud service providers, it actually makes connectivity a much larger challenge. But at the same time, when you say that, what needs to follow on is our security posture needs to also improve when we take that step. So it's that delicate balance between having a secure environment, yet a very adaptable one, right? So that's really the third area of investment I think about. And the fourth is really around intuitive user experience. What's becoming really clear is that the consistency of experience as a user, whether you're in the office, whether you're at home, or whether you're in a remote location of your choice, is becoming incredibly important. So carrying that experience from an office in Chicago to an office in Singapore that the firm may operate in is not nearly good enough anymore. You're going to have to carry that experience across over to the home, as well as any other place of choice that you're choosing to work from. So a couple of areas that form the framework from which we should think about investments and priorities in the future. Now, JLL, I will say that we have a bit of a advantageous position here because of the amount of research that comes out from our organization that leads into our own tech developments in this space. And a very important strategy for us in JLL in technology will be to take these products that we're generating and test them in our various offices and other locations around the world, so that as a firm we become a showcase for our clients.
Excellent. I'm glad you actually mentioned experience when we were talking, because a couple of major, it saved me from figuring out how I could work these studies into the conversation. But a couple of major research studies are predicting that a better workplace experience, along with the technology to enable it, is going to become table stakes for entities that want to attract and retain talent in our new normal. And George, as you know, and we'll talk about in a minute, we're even at JLL creating an experience app to enable that, because we see the demand and the need for it from our clients. With that in mind, I'm going to pivot back up to Marcellus for a perspective. But first, a little background that I don't think a lot of our audience would have. and again, this is something I find very interesting. You oversee JLL's corporate real estate, but most people probably don't know that you actually report up through our human resources function. So think about that for a minute. One of the world's largest commercial real estate companies has its own real estate portfolio management function reporting up through the people function. I think that's pretty important because without people, you don't need the real estate. So with that dual people and real estate focus, Marcellus, give us your perspective on why workplace experience will become so important in the transition to the next normal.
Yeah, you know, it has become more and more apparent how important the experience of our people is in our space. I mean, if you just think about what people in general, right, certainly your employees, but what you are dealing with, what your loved ones are dealing with related to COVID, related to, you know, job insecurity, related to social unrest, related to, you know, the backdrop of a very contentious election cycle, people are dealing with a lot. And I think right now, companies have to figure out, how do we show up for our people, right? The line between work and home is more blurred now than it ever has been in the past. And companies have to step up to the plate and say, how do we take care of our people, the whole person, not just the 9 to 5 that we, you know, care about or that we need in order to excel our own mission or success, but how do we care about our people? And I think that comes down to, how do we make their experience in our workplaces, in our offices, more enjoyable, more productive, and more fruitful from their perspective? Because the research shows that when you have productive people, when you have people who feel connected inside their workplace, everyone wins, right? Your clients reap the benefits from that. And certainly your organization reaps the benefits from that. And I think what companies have to do, and certainly what JLL has tried to do, is say, how do we be on the forefront of that, right? Making sure that our workplaces support the whole person that we've asked to give so much to our organization and so much to our clients that we try and serve every day. And it takes investments. It certainly takes a listening ear, right? You actually have to listen to your employees, and you have to mean it. You have to say, I'm going to hear you out, and then we're going to try and act on it. Now, obviously, it costs our concerns for companies, and you have to prioritize, but it has to be a real effort made to say, we hear you. We are not going to deny what you're experiencing outside of the workplace, because it will impact what happens inside our workplace. And this is how we want to show up for you. And that can be from looking at your benefits, you know, literally what benefits are you offering from an HR standpoint? That could be looking at how you partner with third-party vendors or landlords to offer a better experience, not only within your space, but if you happen to be a part of a larger development. How do you help your people be better connected with each other within your workplace and then outside of the workplace? And so for me, you know, when I came to JLL, it was a unique realization for me that I would be reporting to the Chief Global Human Resources Officer, because typically someone who is a real estate and workplace director reports to, you know, a money person, right? It's a CFO person or an operations person, a COO person, because it's just our real estate. We need to know what our rent's going to be, what our costs are, and then Mr. Director, Ms. Director, mitigate that, right? Cheap, save what we can. JLL decided a long time ago, and Eddie, you mentioned it perfectly, what is our real estate if we are not taking care of our people? If we don't have the people, the real estate is moot. And so JLL said, how do we tie this role, this position, to our people and make sure that there's no creep away from what's most important for us as a company, our people and our clients? And that was, well, we put that role in the people function role, right? We tie it to our talent strategy. We tie it to our overall employee experience. We tie it to our retention strategy. And we inform our strategic portfolio planning tied to our people. And I'll tell you, it's been one of the best experiences I've had, because we start conversations with, how does this impact our people? And then we get to, what's the bottom line? As opposed to saying, this is the bottom line, and we hope it impacts our people in a positive way. That's a very different approach than a lot of companies make. And I think as we move forward, you'll see more companies pivoting to having this role report up through the people function.
Yeah, I like a lot of that. And George, I want to build off of what Marcellus has said, and I'm going to jump in with you a little bit here too, two IT guys talking shop. But I think you would agree with me that there's no reason to have some of our technologies if not for the people. So as Marcellus and Eva Marie and their counterparts around the world are bringing people back to the office, how do you see technology and data analytics facilitating that positive workplace experience? And then I'll share some things that I'm seeing working with clients on the technology front also.
Thanks, Eddie. We're constantly thinking about how we can use technology and data to better support and engage our workforce. And by workforce, this includes the applications that they use every day, the workflows that they use to do their jobs. Technology and data are being baked into every decision we make there. As a firm, we've taken a very strategic position on data in particular. We have a whole data management practice with a chief data officer at JLLT that not only provides data products and services to our clients, but also supports the needs of JLL internally, and then sort of narrowing that gap between what we build for our clients' consumption versus what we use at JLL, right? So big focus for us. Now, when we think about human experience technology in particular, which is what relates to the employee's experience in the office or the workplace, every device that is used in that context starts generating data, right? And most of these technology products do that to make the space more activated and more engaging. And that data that's generated from these devices can be integrated to produce even better human experience technology and applications. So where data becomes really powerful in the workplace context is in its ability to optimize the experience that an occupier goes through and personalizing that to scale, right? And we're just starting to see that. We're just starting to see that across the industry. So for instance, when you know how often people visit an office, how often they utilize a particular service in an office or a workspace, when you know which people will be there and which people won't in a particular week, you can start providing expertly tailored services to these colleagues or occupiers, right? And that too only when it's needed. We see this, these types of use cases already in employee experience, a lot of what Marcellus just talked about. We see this in sustainability. We see this in building operations. So this is a very exciting space and a very exciting time. And if anything, what we've been going through collectively over the last 9 months has accelerated the thinking across many of our clients and ourselves at JLL to make sure the investments and the priorities are right for us as an organization.
It's great.
Eddie, I'm sure you'll add to that.
You know me well. I've always got something to say. No, I think everything you said was spot on. And I started at the top by jokingly saying that I work for Eva Marie. And the reality is she does pull me into a lot of clients that she's talking to. And I think, and Eva Marie, I'll put this out there and then get your reaction to it. I'm seeing more and more people ask about measuring utilization. And for example, can we put sensors in so I know how many people have been in this part of the space? I need that for utilization. How are they using it? But also there's a much higher interest in cleaning. You know, there used to be the days where have the cleaners come in at night. I don't want to see them. Now people are wanting to see cleaning. And I'm seeing a lot of portfolios are saying, help me see how the space is being used in almost real time so that I can take some proactive cleaning. We got a question that came in about how we're helping tenants and clients ensure that we're doing all that we can to create a COVID-free environment. So that's one example. Another one, and I mentioned experience apps. We actually, with our experience app, use experience there multiple times in the sentence, we're finding that people actually will log a work order when they see something walking down a hall, if it's here on their device, versus if they've got to go back to their desk or if they've got to make a phone call. And by the way, it needs to be really easy on the device, and using some of the AI that we've put in there to make it more efficient and easier. We're seeing that benefit. And then the last piece, I think we're talking about integrating and uniting these HR, IT, real estate functions, but it's also integrating and uniting these different technologies that maybe in the past were standalone. So why can't the utilization sensor say a lot of people went down this hallway, kick over to the work order system, which tells the cleaning vendor who sends the cleaning robot. Notice no humans were harmed in any of that. And then the employees know from their experience app that we actually took care of that because we can communicate some of those things to them. And again, we all know the technology is there. Pre-COVID, people were saying that's a nice to have, but what we're seeing in large parts of the world is people are now saying, do that now in some of my primary locations. So with that, Eva Marie, you've heard a bunch of us talking about different things. You're right there front and center with clients. What's your reaction to what we've all said? And what are you hearing from client teams that people should consider when thinking about this experience? I shouldn't say thinking, you're actually living it. People are returning to the office. So what would you add?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of thoughts on this. One is transparency. I think every corporate right now is realizing that they are dealing with an HR issue. The HR issue is they have to create a safe environment. And if they expect their associates to come back into an office, or if they're going to give them more flexibility, there has to be transparency around it. So you gave us a great example about the nighttime cleaning. And if you had any services during the day, it was very that was overt. Completely flip that on its head now, right? It's all about how often do I see somebody cleaning every surface, cleaning every touch point? Where is my sanitizers? We've gone as far as actually having digital verification that something has been sanitized. And that's not going to change, but I would tell you the client focus right now is really around sustainability of those types of services. It's expensive. It wasn't anything that anyone had in any budget. And like it or not, every company, with the exception of a few industries, is really having to take a look at their bottom line and adjust. And so what we're really trying to focus on now is leveraging the data that George was talking about. We have to become consumers of that data. We have to be able to chew it up and spit it back out in the right kind of solution that helps our clients who are telling us we have got to reduce our run rate. We have to have a more efficient use of space. We know that people and they're not going to come Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. They're going to be coming in an alternate fashion, but when they're here, they have to be highly productive. And so this concept of making things more productive and putting it in their hands is really unprecedented for every type of client in the past.
Thanks for that, Eva Marie. And as we were talking, it hit me, and Marcellus, I think you said it earlier, Eva Marie, you alluded to it, George, everybody's alluded to it, so let's just bring it out. COVID's not the only major issue that we're confronting, both as a society and in the workplace. Racial injustice, inequality, civil disorder being talked about more openly and perhaps honestly than many of us have seen in our lifetimes. And while commercial real estate has historically and maybe even rightfully been described in the US as too white, straight male, it strikes me that we are a 100% diverse panel. So I want to take advantage of that opportunity if I can, and maybe have a bit of a conversation we wouldn't have had before all of this. So let me get your perspectives on whether or not everything we're talking about and how we design and manage our workplaces going forward, can we actually do it in a way that fosters greater inclusion? And if we're talking about using technology, you know, we've talked about that a lot, George, is there a way that we can get better interaction to increase diversity and inclusion of how people interact in the workplace? Marcellus, let me start with you. And, you know, what do you think?
Yeah, I love, I got to say, I love how open and how direct our company, JLL, has been about building space to have these types of conversations. I think you're right, and I don't think necessarily this would have been a topic for lots of companies a while ago, but we have certainly made it a priority within our company. And I think, if I look at my own role as a CRE director and workplace director, what always comes to mind, we talk often about D&I and diversity and inclusion. And, the sort of buzzwords now, and I think we all have an idea of what that means. And we really want to make sure that we have diverse talent pools and that we make sure our workplaces, our work environments are inclusive. I think what I am more passionate about is, for me, making your workplace inclusive is you as an employer, as a company, making space for people, right? You should do that. We should do that as responsible corporate citizens. But the other part of that is, are you allowing your employees to show up as their authentic selves? Do they feel a sense of belonging? And that's the other part of the inclusiveness conversation. And so as I look at what we try and do as a company, our spaces where people feel like they can show up every single day, be who they authentically are, and one, understand how that contributes to the company, and two, be valued for that, right? Not have to wake up every day and sort of mask themselves or become someone they aren't just to make it through the day. And that informs how we design, build, and sort of sustain our own real estate plan and how we manage that on an ongoing basis. And what I mean by that is, great, we will have gender neutral bathrooms, and that's certainly inclusive. But what good is that if someone who identifies separately than they were born shows up to work and they don't feel comfortable? They don't feel like they can be themselves, right? How are we addressing that part of it? If I show up as a Black male and I feel like I can't have my natural kinky curly hair because it's not corporate enough, you've included me in the workspace, but I don't feel like I can be who I am. And the company loses out, our clients lose out, and certainly our people lose out on having a well-rounded, diverse experience of body, thought, and people in the space. And so, for me, the workplace inclusiveness conversation is a huge one. It is not a blip, right? The world around us is changing. And I think it would behoove any company to make sure that they are putting themselves in a place where they can, hand over heart, say to employees, to clients, this is a place where you can show up, be included, and feel like you can be your authentic self, in our company. And that to me is a huge thing that a company can say to potential, talent and potential clients.
As you were talking, it reminds me, it's still about the people. It's about attracting that top talent and creating spaces where people feel like they can be their best and contribute. George, what about from a technology perspective?
Yeah, Eddie, I might take a broader take at this, but staying within the context of technology, this is a very interesting area when you start looking at it through the technology lens. I believe technology is neither good or bad when it comes to this topic. It just comes down to how it becomes applied, right? How we take it to market, how we develop products based on it, and that's really where I think it gets interesting. So if you start looking at design, thoughtful design is important for inclusion, right? So, as an example, in the most basic sense, designing user interfaces for universal access, right? Including users with visual, motor, cognitive disabilities. Artificial intelligence is already being used to great effect in this context, from real-time audio transcription that's available in Microsoft Teams and other features and functionality that allow deaf people to attend webinars. And this is currently available in most of our video conferencing platforms. That's sort of one dimension of this. Now, in the back end, there's another interesting dimension that also gets really interesting, which is around the artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms that actually make decisions for us. We all know artificial intelligence is fed by data. And if the data feeding these algorithms are biased, then the resulting algorithm is going to be biased as well, right? And if you were applying some correction to the bias algorithmically at the end of that process, then you have the ethical question around what is the framework that you used to make those decisions to correct the bias that came out of the artificial intelligence routines. So, you know, this becomes serious because these things can start affecting anything from, you know, smart temperature controls in an office to hiring algorithms about decisions made on who you bring into the organization, right? So there's a lot to be thought through in the context of inclusion on the technology side. I'm just scratching the surface of one or two real issues that Eddie, you, me, and others in the technology space, we talk about and we discuss very often, but it just goes on and on. So, you know, in a broader technology context, inclusion it just becomes it's so important, and some very critical decisions have to be made in the near future, so we can start unlocking the full potential of things like artificial intelligence and machine learning without actually, getting caught up in unconscious bias.
Great feedback and commentary, George. Eva Marie, your thoughts on that? And then I'm going to give you guys a kind of a statement based on what I've heard and get your reactions to whether you agree with my summary or not.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we've got 5 generations in the workforce right now. We're in a pandemic. None of us in our lifetime ever thought we would have to be dealing with that. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you don't have diverse thought happening on any of your teams, you will not be successful. We are dealing with something that not one group can solve. And that doesn't matter if we're talking about the economy, if we're talking about the pandemic, if we're talking about civil unrest. It's a all hands on deck situation, and your thought leadership has to be inclusive. Otherwise, we will continue to struggle and we'll have a very one-sided solution, which turns out not to be a solution for everybody. I think overall, what I would tell you is that, you know, what George is pointing out around artificial intelligence is really important because it can help identify where we're really missing the boat. And if we just continue to let the humans solve, and especially a limited number of the humans solving for it, we are going to be influenced with microaggression and also unconscious bias. And it's we live in. So this is going to take a much different approach as we move forward. And not having that perspective is challenging. And so we all need to benefit from opening our eyes and understanding that to be all inclusive and also good consumers of data.
Yeah, it's interesting in listening to the three of you talk. We started out talking about uniting HR, IT, and corporate real estate. That in and of itself is a microcosm of that diversity and inclusion. It's different perspectives, different way of thinking. I think we just took it a step deeper, but again, it keeps coming back to the importance of people feeling like they can collaborate, people having the spaces where they can be productive, people having the flexibility when they come into the offices. So I'm going to reflect on the discussion so far and get you guys to react to this. It sounds like what we're really saying is that this new normal workplace must create healthy, engaging, technology-enabled workplaces where employees and guests can be productive while also being their authentic selves, come in and feel free to be myself so I can focus on work and collaboration. We collaborate in diverse teams, and you know, a lot of people think diversity is about race, gender, sexual orientation, et cetera, but we're actually talking cross functions, ways of thinking, different people involved in contributing their experiences. And those workplaces we create are ones that will attract top talent, which, by the way, top talent is also diverse talent. And where that talent is attracted, they want to be there, they feel included, and they choose to stay. because we have choices now. Would you agree with that statement? And feel free to disagree.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, Eddie. That's a good summary.
So then I'm going to make a real strong statement here for the audience. I think in the not too distant future, we're going to look back and we're going to see that the best workplaces have embraced this concept of a chief workplace officer strategy, if you will, where persons and teams that combine the people focus, Marcellus, technology focus, George, and the real estate focus, Eva Marie, all come together to create these workplaces that do exactly what we just outlined. As we come to the end of this session, I'm going to ask each of you quickly, what one thing would you advise the audience that they should consider as a critical role or responsibility that you would give this chief workplace officer as people on the phone contemplate and think about how they would take this strategy into their own organizations or to their clients? So I'll start with Marcellus.
Yeah, I would say that a person in that role desperately needs to be tied to your people care function, right? HR. You've said it a million times. We've all said it, but it really does start and end with your people. And a person who is concerned and consumed with the workplace, you can't do that unless you are serving the needs of your people. And to me, it cannot sit in a silo, which has been the case often. It can't be managed strictly by the numbers. It has to be about how you show up for your people as a company, as an organization, as an employer. And I think the best way to facilitate that is to have a very, very direct and formally recognized line in or through HR.
Excellent. 30 seconds, George.
I want to first say that a lot of the objectives for a chief workplace officer in the current context, has been satisfied by the three groups that are represented on this call between Eva Marie's group, my group, and Marcella's group in a typical sense, right? But what's happening now is that the workplace of the future is becoming just so critical and central to the strategy of a firm that it now requires its own dedicated practice. And if I were to say one thing that should be the primary focus of this area, is to be able to immerse the human occupier experience in the workplace. And that's a culmination of a couple of different things. But that whole immersion of the occupier experience, the employee experience in a workplace, needs to be the mission statement for this new practice, the chief workplace officer practice, I believe.
Eva Marie, 30 seconds, and then I'll close us out.
It's real simple. You need a change agent who's servant-minded. They need to be empathetic and hospitality-driven.
Excellent. Excellent. To the audience, thank you for your time, but we want to keep the dialogue going. We would love to hear your thoughts on how you'll approach this concept. We can make it simple. You can email me at eddie@jll.com. George gave me a real simple email address, eddie@jll.com. We also got a lot of great questions that require a little bit of a deeper response. We were looking at them, and there's some great questions. So what we'll commit to, we'll take down the questions. We'll actually create some thoughtful answers. We'll put them on one of the blog settings on jllt.com so that everybody can have the benefit of that. But like I said, we'd like to stay connected with all of you, with our panelists. Reach out, share your thoughts, and let's work together to create the next generation office experience that our companies need and our people deserve. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Eddie. Thanks, everyone.